Chapter 25. In front of me. We have to be close. Dylan peered around every hill, as far down the road as he was able when he rounded each bend. But he would see nothing, and around the curve he and Wade would go again. At last, far below, Wade pointed out a small bright blue speck moving in the men's direction before the mountain swallowed up their view. Dylan brought his nail to his mouth and chewed. One of two things: it's not them, or it is and there's been trouble. Dylan and Wade raced around the mountain, tensing with each curve. It appeared the blue speck would never get closer.
Sky and Jesse hadn't driven far when the two noticed a little black speck moving toward them on the hilly road. Sky sighed and wiggled a little higher in the seat. How she wished the speck was the red of Dylan's beat-up truck. She glanced at Jesse. Whoever is in that car must be flying. Every time we come around the bend, they're closer than I expect them to be. Jesse craned his neck as he kept an eye out too. Sky burst out in a cold sweat. The last thing they needed was another problem. All she wanted was to make it back to the cabin, safe and sound. Her white-knuckled hands gripped the steering wheel as her eyes scanned the road. We don't get out of this car, no matter what. We just drive right by it. Jesse quickly shook his head in agreement. One hand clenched the door, the other the seat. When it got close enough, he said, "It's a truck." Sky nodded and loosened her clenched jaw. A tension headache was building. Sky and Jesse watched the black truck barrel around the bend and face them. Sky sucked in a quick breath and moved her hands to the top of the wheel, determined to barrel past them.
Dylan slowed the truck, relief washing over him when he saw Sky and Jesse were both in the car. Sky started to pass Dylan and Wade, then her face brightened. The Jeep screeched as she slammed the brakes and threw it into park. Before Sky jumped out of the vehicle, Dylan knew there had been trouble. Sky and Jesse ran to Dylan. He opened his arms to both, surprised the action almost seemed normal. The boy only wanted a pat or two before moving on to Wade. Dylan's brother clapped Jesse on the back and plied the boy with questions. But Sky stayed with Dylan, her hands clinging to the sides of his shirt. When Dylan laid an arm on Sky's back, she winced. Something protective welled up inside Dylan's chest. What happened? We're fine. Just fine, Sky mumbled into Dylan's t-shirt. The words weren't convincing since tears soaked his shirt. With gentle hands, Dylan took her by the arms and held her away from him. Do you see all this ain't getting better now? You can't go wandering off. Sky tried to dry her tears, but her hands couldn't reach her face, and Dylan wasn't letting go. Sometimes I have trouble seeing what is right in front of me, she said. Dylan scoffed. You're telling me I'm an idiot, okay? She said. I should have waited. Now stop yelling at me and let me go. Dylan removed his hands. He brushed back a bit of hair that had fallen in Sky's face. I'm mad at you now. Sky made a little face at him, and he said, Hey, you're the one always saying it's better to notify others of our mood. Well, I'm mad at you, she shot back. For running off in the woods like that. Guilt sliced through Dylan, and he hung his head. I apologize for that. It wasn't one of my finer moments. Sky uttered a watery chuckle and sniffed. It was the sniff that did it. Dylan's anger at Sky faded away as fast as springtime snow in a warm morning sunrise as he looked down at her red, tear-stained face. His reaction startled him. That little sniff and I'm done. Dylan wanted to pull Sky back to him, but instead he stepped back and crossed his arms. He dropped his gaze to the ground. Friends, just friends. When Sky followed suit, Dylan tipped his head to look at her downturned face. I'm mad at myself for not being here. It won't happen again. Sky nodded. I appreciate that, but it's my fault too. I left, and I should have stayed until you got back. Jesse's waving arms attracted Dylan's attention, and he turned to listen to the boy's story. That man was holding Sky real tight. She couldn't get away. Sky looked at me, and I knew she was thinking something. I waited, like Dylan said. When the big man tried to put Sky on the car, she pushed on it real hard, and the man tumbled backward. Then I took my knife and Sky held up a hand. That's enough, Jesse. It's all over now. Jesse sighed and flapped his arms. But I want to tell Dylan how I hamstringed the guy like he taught me. I hamstringed him real good. What is the boy saying? Dylan's voice as hard as steel. Nothing. We're fine. Sky tried to reassure him, but Dylan wanted the whole story. I want to hear this. Dylan gestured for Jesse to continue. Sky sighed and turned away. Jesse relaunched into his story. This time, Dylan heard it from the beginning and something dark surged in him. He looked at Sky and felt sick she'd had to endure the man's touch. Dylan felt strong and weak at the same time. Strong because he would take care of this, weak because he wasn't there when they needed him. How did he let that happen? Anger returned and swirled white-hot through him. Without a word, Dylan turned to the back of the pickup and strapped what heavy weapons he could to his body. He piled the ones he couldn't on the seat, then Dylan leapt into the driver's seat. One hard look at Wade and his brother was doing the same thing. Sky followed him with her eyebrows drawn. Where are you going? Dylan slammed the vehicle door shut. I'm gonna kill them.